Hi, I'm Carly Weaver, and my paper was titled MSNBC and LGBTQ Issues, Exit Trump, Enter Biden. In the summer of 2015, the United States Supreme Court ruled 4-5 in favor of same-sex marriage. Leading up to this monumental decision was 91 years of activism. According to CNN, the first documented gay organization was founded in Chicago in 1924, launching the beginning of this LGBTQ rights movement, which was not an easygoing task. In 1969, police raided Stonewall Inn and amid protests gave momentum to the movement. Much progress has been made in these years to advance the LGBTQ rights movement. For example, in June of 2016, the Pentagon announced that it would be lifting the ban on transgender individuals in the military. However, these advancements have been challenged and even pushed back during the Trump presidency. In 2018, the Trump administration announced a policy that would ban most transgender people from the military. Additionally, in 2020, the Trump administration argued that Title VII of the Civil Rights Act did not protect from discrimination based on gender identity and sexual orientation, but the administration was unsuccessful in their endeavor. On January 25, 2021, just 4 days after his inauguration, President Biden signed an executive order repealing Trump's ban on transgender people in the military. The research conducted in this paper utilizes the Nexus Uni database to access transcripts from MSNBC's news broadcasts. These transcripts come from shows such as All In, The Beat with Ari Melber, The Rachel Maddow Show, Meet the Press Daily, The 11th Hour with Brian Williams, and more. The purpose of this research is to analyze MSNBC's coverage of LGBTQ policy issues following President Biden's inauguration. I narrowed the search results to yield transcripts from broadcasts after President Biden took office. The codebook asks the following questions. Should LGBTQ people be protected from discrimination? Who is the speaker? Does the coded content mention President Joe Biden or Vice President Kamala Harris? If it does, is there a positive or negative association with Biden or Harris? Does the coded content mention the Democratic Party? If it does, is there a positive or negative association with the Democratic Party? Does the coded content mention the Republican Party? If it does, is there a positive or negative association with the Republican Party? Is religion invoked by the speaker? If it does, what religion? And is there a negative or positive association with that religion? Is a solution recommended? And if there are, how many solutions were presented? And how many times were they mentioned? I start off with using the word LGBTQ for my search criteria, but I found it was not producing an abundance of results, so I added 3 more code words to supplement the first word. These additional words are gay, trans, and transgender. For the code word gay, I did have to exclude the words Mara and Mary because Nexus Uni was referring me to articles with people named Mara Gay and Mary Gay. LGBTQ is defined as an acronym for lesbians, gay, bisexual, and transgender and queer. Gay is defined as a person who is emotionally, romantically, or sexually attracted to members of the same gender. Men and women and non-binary people may use this term to describe themselves. Transgender is defined as an umbrella term for people whose gender identity, and or expression is different from cultural expectations based on the sex they were assigned at birth. Being transgender does not imply any specific sexual orientation. Therefore, transgender people may identify as straight, gay, lesbian, bisexual, etc. Merriam-Webster defines trans as an abbreviation, It is sometimes used in place of transgender. In my code sheet, I use quantitative data. Yes responses receive a 1 score as well as positive responses, and no responses receive a 0 as well as negative responses. In collecting data for the different policy issue areas, I assigned each issue a number value. Table 1, which is featured on this slide, details the issue and number value relationship. So 1 is for military, 2 is Republican relations with the LGBTQ community, 3 is overcoming discrimination, 4 is marriage equality, 5 is bathrooms, 6 is healthcare, 7 is transgender children, and 8 is other. I took quantitative data for positive, switch the slide, sorry. I took quantitative data for the positive versus negative response to the LGBTQ issue topic. I did not make a figure or graph for this data because the results majorly are positive or 1. The outliers are responses to topic issue number 2, Republican relations with the LGBTQ community. In this case, the responses are negative or 0 because the speakers did not support the condition of Republican relations in this area. Another outlier is Senator Paul Rand's speaking part on the readout where he denounces support for transgender children. Religion was not often invoked in these MSNBC news media broadcast transcripts. It was only mentioned 5 times, and only twice was a specific denomination cited, which was evangelical, and never was the religion of any kind used as a deterrent for the LGBTQ community. In retrospect, I should have expected this of an MSNBC broadcast, but I wanted to explore the possibility anyways. Because of this, I did not include the data in a table or figure. Surprisingly, President Joe Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris were not mentioned by name very often when the speaker was talking about LGBTQ issues. Perhaps this is because often the speaker only briefly discussed LGBTQ issues before moving on to other issues demanding their attention. Only 26 out of 76 times were President Joe Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris mentioned. Only 23 times did the speaker offer a positive or 1 expressive response. 3 times a negative or 0 response was offered. Healthcare was not presented as an issue topic in any of the 76 transcripts. I anticipated this would be a more popular issue as I have heard it often discussed in public forums. I would be interested to see how this compares to contrasting media, news media such as Fox News. Because of a lack of data, healthcare is not represented in the tables or figures. I'm going to look at figure 1 now. Okay. Figure 1 is a visual representation of LGBTQ issue frequency on MSNBC's broadcast transcripts. The x-axis is the 8 LGBTQ issue topics. Again, these are military, Republican relations with LGBTQ community, overcoming discrimination, marriage equality, bathrooms, healthcare, transgender children, and other. The y-axis is the percentage of frequency of these specific issue topics in MSNBC television broadcast transcripts. Overcoming discrimination was the most popular topic among MSNBC speakers. This topic had 30.26% frequency in all 76 transcripts. These speakers seemed very interested in helping the LGBTQ community to transcend oppression or talk about the ways in which they have already accomplished this. For example, there were about 6 broadcasts that discussed Pete Buttigieg becoming the first openly gay executive cabinet member, However, when it came to issues like Marjorie Taylor Greene mocking Marie Newman's transgender daughter, I only see 18.42% frequency in MSNBC's transcripts, and not all of these transcripts were in reference to that devastation. MSNBC also had an affinity for criticizing Republican relations with the LGBTQ community. Little energy is being put toward broadcast pieces that reflect actual issues and policies facing the LGBTQ community. This is reflected in low frequency percentages for marriage equality, bathrooms, and healthcare. The 7.89% in the other categories includes topics such as sports, the January 6th insurrection, policing, and protecting LGBTQ people. 15.79% of the frequency was expended to the executive order to end the transgender ban for the military. The interesting thing is that this big piece of news was never given more screen time than a measly sentence. MSNBC and its speakers seem to be participating in what I think to be performance activism by dropping keywords like gay, LGBTQ, trans, and transgender to appear like a participant in the movement. We are going to move on to table 2. So in table 2, I have done a cross tabulation to examine the relationship between the political parties, Democratic and Republican, and speaker responses on MSNBC's broadcast transcripts. Political parties were not mentioned by every speaker. The Republican Party was mentioned for 55.26 of all 76 transcripts, and the Democratic Party was mentioned for only 28.95 of all transcripts. I find it interesting that the Democratic Party only receives positive or 1 responses for 95.75% of transcripts in which they were mentioned, while the responses to the Republican Party receives negative or 0 responses 100% of the time. It is acceptable to be critical of other groups only when you're willing to be reasonably critical of yourself in your own group as well. MSNBC and its speakers are critical only in circumstances where they have a sense of they did well, but they could do better. A sense of party supremacy is not healthy, and that is how the United States came to have Donald Trump as a president. We're going to look at figure 2. So in my code book, I asked the question, should the LGBTQ community be protected from discrimination? Not all speakers answered this question or offered their positions on the topic. 75% of speakers shared an obvious positive or negative response to this question in the transcripts. 73.69% of these speakers had a positive or 1 response, while only 1.31 of speakers had a negative or 0 response. This is an outlier because this is Senator Rand Paul talking about Mary Newman's transgender daughter. Senator Rand Paul equated gender confirmation surgery on minors to genital mutilation. Although I was disappointed with MSNBC and its speakers for spending less time on issues that face LGBTQ communities than criticizing Republicans, I was pleased to see a large number of these speakers making clear their positions on the LGBTQ rights movement. There's only 1 negative or 0 response, but I am surprised it was even included since MSNBC clearly spends a significant amount of time condemning Republicans. I would be interested to see more transparency in MSNBC's broadcasts. Okay, moving on to figure 3. Figure 3 measures the frequency of LGBTQ, gay, trans, or transgender being mentioned in MSNBC broadcasts and transcripts. The number of broadcasts since January 21st, 2021 on MSNBC is unknown to me, but I would be interested to see what percentage of all broadcasts include a LGBTQ topic issue. Looking at figure 3, I would estimate it to be an extremely low number. 85.56% of the MSNBC speakers who did mention LGBTQ topics only mentioned it one time in the whole transcript, and often only one person mentioned the topic. The LGBTQ community is often used as an example of a minority group or a group that is being oppressed. 10% of these speakers afforded the LGBTQ community more screen time with 2 mentions. 4.44% of the speakers 4.44% of the speakers touch on the topic 3 times. This usually occurs when the host asks the guest a follow-up question. These follow-up questions, based on figure 3, do not seem to be of very much interest to the host. Based on my data analysis, I have concluded that MSNBC's coverage of the LGBTQ topic issues is minimal. MSNBC covers the big topics of the day, but they don't really offer any significant coverage of topics that actually face the community every day. President Joe Biden and President Kamala Harris were not as significant factors as I thought when I began data collecting. There are many times when they're not mentioned at all, and I did not collect data for Trump being mentioned, but if I were to revisit this research, I would account for his name being mentioned, because I believe I saw it more than I saw the names Biden and Harris. And I would also compare this data set to a similar set from Donald Trump's presidency. These changes would significantly enhance the analysis, but I do believe the existing data set does an excellent job of addressing MSNBC's media coverage of the significant topic that is LGBTQ issues.